The tension in the chamber was almost sacred, so thick it seemed to tremble in the air. The House oversight hearing had begun like any other, but what followed would enter the annals of modern American history. At the witness table sat Hunter Biden, usually composed, his polished smile replaced by a quiet agitation. His eyes darted toward the cameras. He had answered dozens of questions already, deflecting with well-rehearsed legal phrasing, cloaked in privilege, protected by status. Across from him sat someone no one had expected to be a threat, Jonathan Roumie. He wasn't a politician. He had no office to run for. But that afternoon, Roumie's calm presence carried more weight than the gavels in the room. Known for his moral clarity and spiritual poise, he was there as a citizen witness, invited by the committee for his role in uncovering what many believed to be a suppressed scandal. He didn't glare, he didn't posture, but when he opened the manila folder before him, the entire room leaned in. "Mr. Biden," Roumie began softly, the serenity in his voice more disarming than any raised tone could ever be. "You've spent hours speaking about transparency, yet there are documents here that tell a very different story." Hunter's jaw stiffened. He underestimated the man across from him, a man known more for portraying faith than prosecuting fraud. That would prove to be a devastating mistake. The camera zoomed in on Roumie's calm but piercing gaze. The room, filled with committee staffers, press, and lawmakers, held its breath. Neither man knew it yet, but this moment would soon explode across the internet, challenging the very image of justice in America. To understand the gravity of what was unfolding, the country needed to understand the two men at its center. Hunter Biden, the president's son, had lived a life shadowed by power and plagued by controversy. Though trained as a lawyer and businessman, his name had become synonymous with scandal. Whispers of foreign deals, tax delays, and federal investigations followed him like smoke. He wasn't used to being challenged. Not really. Behind every subpoena was a carefully negotiated boundary. Behind every hearing, a quiet assurance. "You'll be fine." His world had always deferred to him because of who he was, not what he had done. But across from him was someone he couldn't charm, couldn't intimidate, and couldn't dismiss. Jonathan Roumie had no titles, no political debts. He had stepped into the hearing room not for headlines, but for truth. Years of advocacy had prepared him for this moment, not with anger, but with focus, not with fury, but with clarity. The setting was cinematic, soft afternoon light spilling in through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished wood of the witness table. There was an almost divine silence before Roumie spoke again. "You testified that politics plays no part in the legal process surrounding your case," Roumie said, voice steady. "Is that your sworn position today?" Hunter leaned forward, trying to mask his discomfort with formality. "Yes," he replied, forcing confidence. "All decisions regarding my case have been made based on law and evidence, not politics." It was the answer his lawyers had prepped him to give, but it was the exact answer Roumie had come prepared to dismantle. Document by document, memo by memo, truth by exposed truth. The response Hunter gave was classic damage control, technically correct, safely vague, and profoundly hollow. But Jonathan Roumie had come expecting that exact kind of evasion. "Facts and law," Roumie repeated softly, scribbling something into his notebook with deliberate precision. The act seemed casual, almost ceremonial, but it carried a silent message. "I am building a record." He looked back up, eyes clear and unwavering. "That's interesting," Roumie continued, unfolding the manila folder before him with the grace of a surgeon, "because I've been reviewing internal communications from your department, and I was hoping you could help me understand a few things." Hunter's jaw stiffened. Inside the folder was a series of neatly tabbed documents, color-coded, time-stamped, and damning. The first crack in Hunter's carefully groomed exterior appeared in the slight twitch beneath his left eye. Still, he nodded politely, trying to maintain the illusion of calm. Around the room, the air shifted. A few committee members stirred in their chairs. They had assumed Roumie would offer philosophical remarks or maybe quote scripture about justice. No one expected receipts. Then came the question that silenced the entire chamber. "Mr. Biden," Roumie said, gently but unflinchingly, "are you familiar with the timeline of your own federal investigation?" The words struck like a thunderclap. Reporters froze mid-type. Republican committee members sat bolt upright. Even the cameras, it seemed, zoomed in a little closer. "I'm aware of the general parameters," Hunter answered carefully, his legal instincts kicking in. "Never give more than necessary. Stay broad, stay vague." "The general parameters," Roumie repeated, a faint knowing smile forming on his lips. It was the kind of smile lawyers wear just before setting off a chain reaction in court. "Well," he said, leaning forward slightly, "let me be more specific. Are you aware that the Department of Justice had evidence of potential tax violations against you as early as 2019, but the case was continually delayed?" Hunter shifted in his chair. "Those matters involve ongoing investigations. I can't speak to specific details." "Oh," Roumie said gently, "but this isn't ongoing anymore, is it? A plea deal has already been reached, has it not? Which means you can speak to the timeline. Unless, of course, there's something else you're withholding." Republicans on the dais leaned forward, sensing that Roumie was building towards something no one had been able to reach, not even them. Democrats sat frozen, some fidgeting, uncertain of where this was headed. They hadn't been warned. No one had. Hunter's voice turned sharp. "You may not understand the complexity of federal legal procedures." But Roumie's reply came immediately, calm, centered, and unyielding. "I've spent over a decade working alongside people harmed by broken institutions," he said. "And what I do understand, Mr. Biden, is that this particular case took over 4 years to reach resolution, when most are handled in less than 18 months. A chill passed through the room. Roumie reached down and lifted a document from his folder, holding it high enough for the cameras to catch. "This is a memo dated March 15, 2022, he said. It states, and I quote, "Prosecution team recommends proceeding with charges. However, given current political climate, suggests delaying until after midterm election." The room exploded, gasps, shouting, reporters madly typing. One Democratic aide dropped their pen. Hunter Biden paled. It was no longer just discomfort. It was fear. "I don't know where you obtained that document," Hunter said, visibly shaken, "but I question its authenticity." Roumie leaned forward again, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Are you accusing me, Mr. Biden, of presenting forged evidence to the United States Congress?" There was no sarcasm, no anger, just a razor-sharp clarity that cut deeper than fury ever could. "I'm saying," Hunter stammered, "you may not fully understand the context of internal communications." "The context?" Roumie echoed, narrowing his eyes. "Because moments ago, under oath, you claimed that politics played no role in prosecutorial decisions. And yet, this document says otherwise. Which is it, Mr. Biden?" Hunter looked around for an ally, but none met his eyes. Roumie rose slowly to his feet, lifting another paper. "Here's another," he said, "and another. In total, I have 7 internal memos, each showing that DOJ prosecutors were prepared to move forward, and each time they were told to delay. And every delay, just happened to coincide with a politically sensitive moment, for your father's administration." The silence was electric. Chairman Jim Jordan's smirk was unmistakable. Republican members glanced at one another in astonishment. Democrats stared straight ahead, the lines on their faces tightening with concern. Hunter tried one final defense. "I've worked in law long enough to know these matters aren't simple." Roumie cut in, gently but firmly. "No, Mr. Biden. You've worked long enough to benefit from that complexity. You've used it as cover." Hunter's face flushed. "I've been part of this system," Roumie continued, his voice low and firm, "but I've also walked with people crushed by it. I've seen how quickly prosecutors move when the accused has no connections, no family name to shield them. But when it came to you, everything slowed down. Every decision was delayed, every file was quietly shelved, and every excuse was political." Then, with careful purpose, he lifted one final document into the air. The room went dead silent. Hunter Biden had just made a devastating mistake, and everyone in that chamber knew it. Jonathan Roumie didn't flinch. He stood perfectly still, letting the weight of Hunter's arrogance hang in the air like heavy incense. The silence stretched, raw and excruciating, as lawmakers, aides, and journalists all recognized the truth. Hunter Biden had walked directly into a trap, and Jonathan Roumie had said it with grace. Then Roumie spoke. His voice was calm, but it sliced with terrifying precision. "Mr. Biden, did you just imply that my lack of political office somehow disqualifies me from understanding legal procedure?" Hunter blinked, panic flickering across his face. "That's not what Because if that's your position," Roumie continued, stepping gently around the table to face the entire room, "then I think the American people deserve to know that you believe accountability only applies to those you deem sufficiently credentialed." He paused, long enough for the cameras to focus, for the gallery to brace. "You said you've spent over 2 decades in the legal system. Impressive. But do you know what I've done over the last 10 years? Hunter said nothing. He couldn't. His composure was already gone. I've walked with the broken. I've stood beside the falsely accused. I've listened to the stories of men and women crushed by the very Justice Department you benefited from. Roumie turned, lifted another document from his folder, and held it up like a sacred text. This is a memo dated June 8, 2022. It outlines a comprehensive case: tax evasion, money laundering, and violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Your prosecutors were ready. They had built their case, and yet they were told to wait. He fixed his eyes on Hunter. Can you explain me, Rhea? Hunter fumbled for words. These matters involve complex internal. Roumie raised his hand. Let me save you the trouble. He placed the memo down and picked up another, then another. The stack grew like social stones on a grave. The answer, he said, is politics. Every single delay in your investigation aligned perfectly with political pressure points. The 22 midterms, the classified documents probe, your father's re-election campaign. Each memo, each quote, each timestamp, they were nails, and Roumie drove them in without raising his voice. But what truly troubles me, he continued, his tone tightening, is that while this investigation was being stalled for your protection, others were being accelerated. The room pulsed with shock. You fast-tracked charges against political opponents while shielding yourself behind procedural fog. Mr. Biden, these aren't just poor decisions. These are deliberate distortions of justice. Hunter tried to recover. I resent the implication. Roumie didn't let him finish. These aren't implications, he said, now standing fully upright, his presence commanding. These are facts. These are your department's own document. And then, with solemnity, he lifted the final blow. This is a memo dated January 10th, 2023. It is a summary from your Deputy Attorney General stating explicitly that the investigation timeline into your conduct was adjusted to minimize political impact on the administration. He held it still. For a moment, you could hear the hum of the cameras, the shallow breath of reporters, the stunned silence of elected officials. Your signature, Roumie said quietly, is on the approval page. The room erupted. Republicans shouted over one another. Democrats scrambled for procedural objections. Reporters bolted from their chairs to file what would become the most viral moment of the year. Through it all, Hunter Biden sat frozen, eyes locked on the document in Roumie's hand, his career unraveling before him. Roumie stepped back behind his desk, his voice now low, firm, and final. So let me ask you again, Mr. Biden, does the Justice Department make decisions based on facts and law, or does it make them based on politics? Hunter opened his mouth, but no words came out. For the first time in his privileged, protected life, he had no answer. Roumie nodded solemnly. I believe your silence speaks for itself. He scanned the room once more, lifting the final sheet of paper. Just so we're clear, here's what your own records show. The DOJ delayed prosecution of your case for political reasons. You personally signed off on those delays. And then you came before this body and testified under oath that politics played no role. Mr. Biden, that is called perjury. The gavel slammed. Chaos. Jordan shouted for order. Democrats shouted back. The press gallery buzzed with frantic energy. But Jonathan Roumie didn't move. He stood at his desk, serene, steady, the embodiment of conviction in a room that had just been struck by truth like thunder. Hunter Biden sat hollowed and hunched, surrounded by paper. His own words, his own timeline, his own undoing. The hearing had adjourned, but in the digital age, the courtroom never sleeps. Within minutes, social media ignited. TikTok was overflowing with reaction videos, side-by-side footage comparing Hunter Biden's confident smirks at the start of the hearing to the hollow stare he wore by the end. One video simply showed Roumie's calm delivery of the word perjury, looping over a cinematic orchestral score. It was being shared millions of times. YouTube exploded with emergency live streams and legal breakdowns. Titles like, Jonathan Roumie just ended Hunter Biden's credibility on live TV, and this is what real oversight looks like, flooded the homepage. News anchors were scrambling to get constitutional law experts into studios before nightfall. Back inside the Capitol, panic had taken root. Hunter's team was in full-blown crisis mode. His chief of staff was frantically whispering into a phone connected to the White House. DOJ communications staffers were huddled in corners, drafting and deleting potential press statements, their laptops glowing red under the pressure. When the hearing resumed after a 30-minute recess, Hunter Biden walked back into the room a different man. Gone was the smug certainty. What remained was a haunted shell, a man who now knew his name was etched across every trending topic, every television chyron, every morning headline. Democratic committee members, visibly shaken, tried to throw him lifelines, softball questions, procedural redirections, an occasional joke to soften the mood. But the damage was irreversible. Every answer Hunter gave was defensive. Every clarification sounded manufactured. The truth, or at least the perception of it, had already been laid bare, and it wore Roumie's voice like armor. Republican members sensed blood in the water. Their tone shifted from respectful to surgical. How many other investigations were delayed, Mr. Biden? Who inside the DOJ approved the memos, Roumie revealed? Was the White House directly involved? Hunter deflected, stumbled, dodged. His answers grew softer. His confidence eroded. Then came the moment that sealed it all. Chairman Jim Jordan leaned in and asked, Mr. Biden, do you dispute the authenticity of the documents Mr. Roumie presented today? A 30-second pause followed, a silence that felt biblical. I would need to review them in their full context. Jordan didn't blink. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Are these genuine DOJ documents? With your signature? Yes or no? Hunter exhaled slowly. They appear to be genuine. Jordan nodded. No further questions. What followed was nothing short of a media superstorm. Hashtags roared across every platform. Hashtag Roumie exposes. Hunter and Howard perjury trap. Documents don't lie. Justice for sale. TikTokers mashed clips of Roumie's statements with Bible verses, courtroom dramas, and dramatic slow-motion edits. Instagram reels featured the stunned faces of lawmakers, overlaid with fire emojis and audio of gavel strikes. YouTube channels posted legal dissections titled, Hunter Biden's Downfall in 12 Minutes Flat. Reddit exploded. The r/Law subreddit broke all traffic records, with verified attorneys analyzing the legal weight of every single memo. Even international forums, UK, Germany, Brazil, expressed amazement at what they were witnessing. A spiritual figure dismantling political corruption with only paper and poise. Cable networks scrambled to keep up. CNN's legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin called it perhaps the most devastating moment for a politically connected figure in modern congressional history. MSNBC's Ari Melber hesitated but conceded, if these documents are real, they show exactly the kind of political interference we always said was unacceptable under Trump, and now it's happened again. Fox News went nuclear. Their headline, Hunter Biden caught, Roumie triggers, DOJ collapse. Even comedy had its take. Writers at Saturday Night Live were already scripting the cold open, a sweaty, stammering Hunter Biden facing off against a serene, robe-clad Roumie. Late-night hosts, usually divided along party lines, all agreed on one thing. Roumie's composure was unmatched, but perhaps the most stunning silence came from within. Democratic leadership, usually fast to rally behind embattled figures, was nowhere to be seen. No press conferences, no social media defense, no talking points circulated. Meanwhile, Republican leadership pounced. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy issued a statement within hours. What we witnessed today was not a political ambush. It was an exposure. The Biden administration has turned the Department of Justice into a political shield for its own. Hunter Biden has lost all credibility. Attorney General or not, accountability must come next. The White House, sensing the pressure, tried damage control. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters, the president maintains full confidence in Mr. Biden's integrity and in the rule of law. But when asked specifically about the documents Roumie presented, I haven't seen them, she admitted. I'd have to refer you to the Department of Justice. Meanwhile, Jonathan Roumie was experiencing a moment unlike any seen in recent American political history. His team fielded interview requests from every major outlet. Fox News invited him to guest host. MSNBC wanted him for a panel on justice reform. CNN was already planning a special episode, but Roumie turned most of them down. He did sit down with Jake Tapper on CNN that night. I did what any honest man should do, Roumie said calmly. I examined the truth, I followed the trail, and I spoke it plainly. The courtroom was Congress, the jury, the American people. Tapper pressed, how did you obtain these internal DOJ documents? Through proper channels, Roumie said, legitimate subpoenas, lawful transparency. The real question isn't how I got them. It's why Hunter Biden believed he could sit in front of this country and pretend they didn't exist. The legal fallout was seismic. The political implications, even greater. Republicans, emboldened by what they had just witnessed, immediately began preparing follow-up hearings, issuing new subpoenas, and calling for a special counsel investigation into what now looked less like incompetence and more like a systemic cover-up. Democrats? They scrambled to change the subject, but it was too late. The story had escaped the walls of the Capitol. It was now a living force, and at the center of it stood a man no one saw coming, Jonathan Roumie, a faith-filled citizen, a man with no political title, no committee seat, and no super PAC, just a folder of government documents, and the moral courage to read them out loud. Progressive voices who had once dismissed him as too spiritual were now hailing his sense of purpose. Conservative pundits, many of whom had never even said his name, were now admitting, often reluctantly, that he had done what they had failed to do for months. He laid the trap, and Hunter walked right into it. One GOP strategist admitted off record. No shouting, no showboating, just cold, hard truth. But the story wasn't over. Congressional investigators were now reopening files. The Justice Department's Inspector General had announced a formal review. Whistleblowers began stepping forward. Some had emails, others had recordings. All had one thing in common. They finally believed someone would listen. Within 72 hours, additional memos leaked. More evidence that internal DOJ decisions had been deliberately politicized. The whispers became a roar. "This isn't just about Hunter anymore," said one senior prosecutor. "This may touch everything." The legal community buzzed with alarm. Top defense attorneys across the country filed motions asking courts to revisit every case delayed or accelerated during Hunter's time as an influence figure inside the DOJ chain. Even former Attorney General William Barr broke his silence. "If the documents Roumie presented are authentic," he wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, "then this is no longer about one man. This is about the soul of the Department of Justice, and it has been compromised." The world was watching. Legal experts in Canada, the UK, and Germany questioned whether America still upheld judicial independence. The BBC aired a special titled "Banana Republic: When Politics and Justice Collide in Washington." Back in Texas, Roumie's home state, something extraordinary was unfolding. People who had barely heard of him a week ago now called him a guardian of truth. A retired school teacher named Maria Rodriguez summed up the moment perfectly. "We sent quiet men to Washington before. They vanished. Roumie walked in, told the truth, and walked out holding our faith in democracy in one hand and Hunter Biden's signature in the other." The donations surged, but not for a campaign. People didn't want Jonathan Roumie to run. They wanted him to keep watching, keep questioning, keep reminding the powerful, "You serve, you do not rule." And for Hunter Biden, this was no longer a hearing. It was the beginning of the end. His name was now tied not to legacy, but to scandal. Legal experts whispered one terrifying word: perjury. For the nation, it was a moment of reckoning. In an era where loud voices often drowned out true ones, a quiet man had risen not to perform, but to hold the line. He reminded America and the world that real oversight doesn't come with applause. It comes with preparation, integrity, and the unshakable belief that the truth still matters. The hearing had lasted mere hours, but its aftershocks would echo for decades. And it all began with a man no one expected, who simply refused to stay silent. Subscribe and stay awake. If you believe in the power of truth over politics, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. This isn't the end of the story, it's only the beginning. Because as long as power protects itself, someone must still ask the hard questions. And Jonathan Roumie just showed the world how. What you just witnessed wasn't just a hearing, it was a turning point. One man, armed only with truth, and preparation, stood up against power and exposed a system most believed was untouchable. If this story moved you, if you believe truth still matters, and if you want to see more confrontations where justice is demanded, not delayed, subscribe to this channel. Join a community that believes in accountability, courage, and the power of asking the hard questions. Because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next.